Today we'll be cleaning a carburetor on a 2004 Arctic Cat 400. And we've got the carburetor off here. This is where your throttle cable comes down into, and it hooks to this piece here. And this spins that butterfly. If you pull this lever here, which your throttle cable will do, when you push your thumb throttle, it opens that butterfly up, allowing air and fuel to be sucked through and go to the motor. This is your intake side. This is where your air filter goes. This is your outlet side here. So this goes directly to your motor. This is the bowl of the carburetor. Here's a model number here. This is your top cap here, and there's a diaphragm in there. It's a rubber diaphragm. If that's at all damaged, this will not go up and down properly like it's supposed to. When you take compressed air and you blow into this, it will raise this slide up. You can see when you blow right into this slot right there, it'll raise that slide up there, your needle up, allowing fuel to come up, allowing more air to go through. So if you can blow in it and it does not go up like it's doing there, then you've got problems. So what we're gonna do now is pull this bottom bowl off here, 4 Phillips screws on the outside, and we'll take a look at the inside of this carburetor. This is an aluminum carburetor, and so these screws don't have to be very tight going in there. You want to make sure they're good and snug, make sure there's an O-ring that seals properly, but you don't need to tighten these down. A lot of people will tighten them so much that they're hard to get out, and if that does happen, you can use small vice grips and unscrew these 4 screws. That generally will work. So there's the bowl there. Here's that O-ring I was talking about. Make sure that seals good. This is your overflow nipple here. So if the fuel is too full, the float won't shut off here, the needle and seat won't shut off here, allowing fuel to come in. Instead of dumping into the motor or dumping into the intake of the carburetor, the fuel is supposed to come out this nipple here, and it'll come out the bottom here. That's why it's important to have a hose going to the bottom side of your motor on your Arctic Cat, so that fuel isn't dumping directly on top of that motor. If you're draining your fuel for the year, you can pull this Phillips screw here, and that'll allow fuel to drain out this bottom nipple here, and then that way there's no fuel sitting in your carburetor. We've got your main jet here, we got a secondary main, and we've got the pilot jet down in here. They're all taken out with a flat screwdriver, and this first one here, the main jet, is 150 main. So this one is always bigger than your secondary main, and the secondary on this is 75, and then our pilot jet is a 38. So you just take them all out, and they're fairly simple to do. They're brass, so you want to make sure that your screwdriver is secure on there before you start to turn. If you turn it without it being in the right spot, it could damage this area, not allowing you to pull this jet out. So there's the pilot jet there. You want to make sure that you blow through it with compressed air and or use carb cleaner, but you want to make sure that you can see through it. When you hold it up to light, you want to make sure that you can see through it. If you cannot, then there's a problem. We've got your pin here, and this is how you take your needle and seat out and your bowl off of here. So we might have to, I'm gonna grab a smaller plier here. Or a pick. And you just gotta, a lot of times this pin will just come right out of there like that, and then you can just pull the needle, or the needle out, which is on the bottom of the bowl here, or excuse me, the bottom of the float here. And then this float is adjustable, so there's a metal tab right here that you're able to raise and lower if you need. If your seat is damaged or your needle is damaged, replace those. Do not just adjust this to try to stop fuel. That won't allow, if you adjust it improperly, you won't allow fuel to come in there as quick as it needs, and you'll run lean. So you want to make sure that you only adjust those that a small amount, and only if you've got too much fuel coming in. Putting it back together, just slide that pin through there, and it doesn't matter on this. It doesn't matter which way that needle sits on here. So when you take it off, you can see that the pin, this is right in the center. This little clip is right in the center, so you can slide it on there either way. So you sit down there, make sure that sits down in your seat, is what they call that. And then you go ahead and you put that pin, slide that back through there. Now these jets, these are already clean, but we'll pull them out. Your secondary main that looks exactly like your main jet. Just a little brass jet here. Again, that's a 75. And that depends on your altitude, your riding conditions, whatever is done to the four-wheeler, if you've got exhaust or air filter or anything like that. Your main jet, and a lot of times your main jet holder will come out with it, and that's fine. You just want to make sure, again, that you can see through there. When you hold it up to light, make sure you can see through that port all the way through, and it should be clean enough to do that. You can see there's your needle, and we'll go to that next, but that comes all the way down and kind of sits into your main jet holder. You're going to make sure, going back together, these are snug. Again, going into aluminum, it doesn't have to be overly tight. Also, what we'll do is look at this air fuel screw here, and that's this screw in here. And what you want to do before you remove it, you want to take and you want to spin that all the way in, and you want to count those turns. So we'll do, well, this one I guess we already put all the way in, but it was 2.5 screws out, which is generally about what it needs to be, but you can adjust it according to altitude. But screw it all the way in, and then you can pull it out. But you want to know how many turns out it is, or how many turns in it is before you pull it all the way out. That way you can put it right back to where it was. It's got a spring on the bottom of this. That way there's always pressure on it, and you can dump that spring out and blow through that area. And that's also, again, a small port. We've got a small needle here. There's a spring. Going back together, you go all the way in until it's seated, and then you turn out as many turns as you need. And again, generally it's around 2 to 2.5. So all the way in, and then we do half, 1, half, 2.5. That's 2.5 turns out. We'll go ahead and put this back on. Tighten these screws down. Again, doesn't have to be tight. If you've got debris in your carburetor, it's just not running quite right, or it's just not starting, you want to pull this bowl, and generally if it's not starting, you've got debris in your pilot jets. You want to make sure that's good and clean. Obviously when it's there, you want to go through and clean everything. A lot of times debris will sit in the bottom of this bowl here, and when you start up your four-wheeler, it'll suck that debris up into those jets. Sometimes it'll even drop back down when it's sitting there. Here is, again, that slide there with your needle going through there. You want to make sure that moves properly. Here's your idle adjust here. And again, that's just turning this butterfly, opening that butterfly up a little bit. A lot of times you want to find where it's not touching at all. And then if you need to, you can start it, try to run it like that. If it doesn't run like that, you can take and you can open it up just a hair. And then try running it that way. You never want to adjust a carburetor when the four-wheeler's cold. And you never want to adjust it more than a quarter turn at a time, because that quarter turn can make a big difference. So we'll pull this here. Pull this top cover here. Look at the diaphragm in here. We've got 4 Phillips screws again. What I like to do is take and put my finger on top when I'm unscrewing these, because this is spring loaded and it'll pop off and parts won't go flying everywhere, but you want to make sure that you have everything together. And this, again, will need a seal, just like your bottom O-ring. This also has a seal on here, and the diaphragm acts as the seal. It's a rubber diaphragm. So keep the finger on there until you got them all the way off, then you can just pop it off. There's a spring here. That's what would make this spring loaded. We've got the diaphragm there. Inspect it for any cracks, any rips. You want to make sure, going back together, that it is seated properly around the outside. If it's wrinkled like this, and you put it back together, it will not flow open like it should. So it's supposed to flow open when you blow into there. It should open it up. If it's kinked at all or there's rip in there, it will not open up properly. So if you get fuel on it or carb cleaner, a lot of times these will expand. or get smaller, and you just want to maybe put it in the sun, let it dry out. Going back together, your needle will just come right out of there when you, if you need to take that out or replace it. If it's damaged, you can, depending on if you're aftermarket parts, you can replace these needles for different jet kits. You want to make sure that it sits down there properly, right in the center of that. There's 2 holes in there. You want to make sure that you find the right one, which is right in the center. Then this spring and this keeper goes down there. There's only one way this slide will go into this carburetor. So if you try going the wrong way, it won't go down. Then you want to make sure it goes all the way down into there, into that main jet area. And make sure it's seated properly. Take that cap, put it on there, and go ahead and put those 4 screws in there. Again, make sure, I like to keep my finger, keep some pressure on that finger there. That way it doesn't pop up and then it doesn't seal properly. So get a couple screws in there, make sure it's not going to pop up, and then you can take your hands off of there. If all those parts are clean, there's no more debris in that bottom bowl, put this back on the 4-wheeler. If you have a fuel problem, this should take care of it. So that's a carburetor on a 2004 Arctic Cat 400, 4-wheel drive.